All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Sales Vitamin Podcast, where every episode is going to help you get better as a sales professional, help your sales team, and maybe help you grow as an individual. And today's guest is definitely going to help your sales, and she's definitely going to help you on the digital side of your business. Brandi Bernoskie. She's a digital strategist, website developer, and she's the founder of Alchemy+Aim. And she's also got two other companies that we're going to talk about. But she's our guest today, and excited to have you, Brandi, on the show to talk about something we don't talk about a whole lot, but I think it's very, very important for sales success.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
So give the listeners kind of a high level, just kind of a background. You've got a great background. Your education really doesn't really say, hey, this is what you do, but I think it plays an important part in what you do. But kind of give them a background of where you started and how you got to where you're at right now.
Absolutely. So I originally started out as a theater major. I was majoring, actually double majoring in theater and physics at the time at NYU. Eventually decided just to make it a theater major, took a physics minor. And this was actually in New York City in like 1998 to 2002. So there was a lot happening, in New York at that time, needless to say. And I think a lot of us who were in New York, I mean, everyone around the country in general, but I think especially those of us who were in New York City for September 11th, just kind of had that moment of like, wait, am I doing what I'm really supposed to be doing?
Right.
And I didn't think theater was the answer. I did not know what was, but it led me to just following my curiosity. Like that has been a theme in my whole life. I just keep following my curiosity. So I ended up then at Rutgers University for a number of years studying religion, philosophy, and then getting back in and doing another physics major and a math minor also.
Okay.
Just because I was really fascinated at this like intersection of practices and areas, of teaching. So like what happens when you look at physics and philosophy together? There is actually a field called philosophy of physics and there's philosophy of science. And they say really interesting things about like the way that we look at how we do physics or how we do science, how we understand it. So I just kind of kept doing that. And while I was actually studying at Rutgers, I started a blog. And right around the time I graduated NYU, I had taken an HTML course. It was a weekend course at School of Visual Arts in New York. So I had like just this like little bit of HTML knowledge.
Yeah.
So I was going into my blog and like, messing things up, learning what RSS stood for and how to have one of those feeds that everyone told me I needed.
Yeah.
And that kind of honestly, like that was probably 2007. So it was the early days of blogging back then.
Yeah.
And I just kept at it. I was writing at least 7 days a week, often sometimes twice a day as well, just because it gave me this opportunity to express all these different parts of myself. So I had a food blog at one point. I would just post things of like places I want to travel or things I found that I liked or, photographs I took that I thought were interesting.
Yeah.
There was no real crazy purpose, but the whole time I was learning to code because I would just go in my back end and mess around with it until I got to a place where I wanted to get it to.
Wow.
So inevitably friends started to notice I was doing this. And I had another blogger who happened to be a designer reach out to me in time and ask if I would like code her designs into themes. And so I figured, why not? Like at this point, I had left grad school and I was working part-time I was working full-time for a nonprofit and working part-time, just kind of like doing little bits of code for people when they needed it.
Yeah.
And eventually I realized that I had the opportunity to take this full-time. Everyone thought I was crazy. I had a great job. It was good salary, benefits, nonprofit in the Washington, D.C. area. We were actually doing earth science education with NASA, like really, really awesome. But I was like, there's something more and I have to follow it now. At the time I just didn't have any strings. So I was single, no kids. I figured, why not do this? What is the worst thing that could happen? And so I started to put myself out there as a freelance developer.
Okay.
And I will tell you the blog connections that I had made in those previous years came in so handy. Like all of my friends from the blogging world started connecting me with clients.
Okay.
And I would say within a year and a half, I had some of my, like, some big clients actually like on my roster that I was working with. And
Yeah.
a lot of it was, learning as I went. And so it's now been 8 years,
Okay.
and we now have a team of 15 people.
Wow.
And it's grown a lot. I don't get to do development anymore. I get to go in and tweak at times, but my real job these days is to make sure that the big picture vision is being translated properly, and that I'm helping clients with strategy. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. I think what your story shows, I mean, you self-taught yourself to code and you did these types of things, but the network and the people that you met from a sales standpoint, and this is a great sales vitamin for the listeners, really helped you after the fact. Really, you had a lot of connections in the networking side of it. Where did you get the name Alchemy+Aim? Where does that come from? Is that from your background and the philosophy
it is a little bit. I will tell you, I have a terrible time naming things. And it was about 2 years into the business where my admin assistant was like, it just sounds weird that I say I work for Brandi Bernoskie. She's like, I think you need to name this thing. So I was really struggling with a name, and alchemy was just always one of those fields, historical fields of interest, of like being able to take something and transform it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I felt like we were doing with websites. We were taking, ideas and transforming them into something real. We were taking the entrepreneur and transforming them into someone who's more confident and capable and sure of themselves through the process. So that word just kind of like, I latched onto it, and I knew I just couldn't call it alchemy, and I didn't want to call it like alchemy agency. So I went the hipster route, as I say, and gave it like an and name. And at the time I was also doing a lot of archery. So I liked that, the directional focus of the word aim, that it's not just about transforming to transform. It's about transforming like with a path or goal or purpose in mind. Like it's, transforming with some sort of higher idea in mind as well. So that's kind of just it. Honestly, I was sitting on a porch in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the house I was renting at the time, and it kind of just struck me, and I was like, that is absolutely it.
Nice. Yeah. So websites, building the right website for your business, websites since when you were coding back in the early, and when you learned to do that back in the early 2000s, it's changed a lot. So
it has.
There's kind of and this is just me talking. I'll let you give the listeners kind of the professional side of it, but there seems to be a cookie cutter way you can go, or you can go a really a high dollar, I would say, or a high value end, where you really have someone like your company come in and really gear your website for sales. How do you work with your clients? And I'm talking from a sales perspective. If someone comes to you and says, hey, here's our website, or I don't even have a website, how do you, it seems so overwhelming, but you've got to gear this website to maximize exposure and sales. So to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I actually still do all of the sales calls in the company, just because I really want to make sure we get clients exactly what they need. And that's going to look different for every client. So I really like to dig in with them on where are they in their business?
Okay.
Because if they're just starting out, it's probably not going to be the right time for them to make a big investment, and we need to do something a little different. I like to see how many clients they've had, if they've really kind of started to discover their ideal client and how they're going to speak to them, or if that's something that needs to be worked on.
Okay.
And then for, larger companies, I start kind of digging into not just, what the sales goals are, or the marketing goals, or, the visibility goals, because that's also going to be a little bit different depending upon the business, but also what the business systems goals are, because there's so much that we can actually build into a website, especially a custom site. We can start to actually solve business problems through website technology.
Wow.
Which is really, really interesting. And I have a lot of fun with that. But it really comes down to like really talking to a business owner about the business itself and what the goals are, and then what we need to start doing on the website to optimize to achieve those goals. And I don't, there's a lot of people who have similar goals, but, I always say to people, like, is the website alone going to sell something? No, probably what it's going to be is that you're going to build some sort of relationship with your audience on social media or newsletters, emails, something along those lines. So very oftentimes, like the very one of the first goals that we have is like, can we just create a system that you are nurturing and building relationships with people?
Okay.
And let's work that in. And yeah, like, let's make the buy easy. Let's make the ask easy. Don't make it hard for people to figure out what you offer or how to purchase from you.
Right.
So we're kind of just working in all of those details. And it really does, like, for someone who's just starting out, sometimes I tell them, like, go get a one-page site on Squarespace, like one page, because if you have not had a client yet, you're not going to know how to talk to your clients.
Right.
Do a quick one-page, Squarespace site, get it up and going, get out there, come back to me in 3 to 6 months. When you've had like 5 clients, we can really start doing good work together. And your investment in the website at that point is going to be so much more valuable and worth it, because you're going to have some data from the real world and your real interactions to know how to talk to people. And that's what I really think, like, the best thing you can do on a website to help sell anything is understand the problem that your users or your audience has, and actually language to them in a way that they resonate with that language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an iterative process, it seems. Yes. So someone that is a smaller company, or maybe an individual, like you said, they can go use Weebly or whoever, get a one page up there and or 2 pages and get going. What are the impacts you've seen, though, from a sales standpoint, when you really get dialed into that stage that you were talking about, where you're really communicating and it becomes very easy for the customer to navigate your website? What kind of impact from a brand and digital strategy does that have for the individual or the organization?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is you notice that the inflow of clients are almost always the ideal fits. Like, they, if we're talking about like if you're a coach, those clients you're getting, they are the clients you want to be working with. You don't have to like have that conversation when you're like, well, it's not really what I do, and I can't really help you. And, you're not like losing time on those calls that are ill fits because you didn't language to them properly at first. So overall, I've noticed with clients, like, when we really dial that in, and we have to recalibrate on a regular basis, because the clients, the business owners evolving, their needs are changing, world is changing around them. And sometimes when the world changes, your needs change as well. So we're always recalibrating that language and what needs to happen on the site, and, what's happening like on the back end as the business grows. But I would say that's the biggest thing, is like, you just attract the right people, and that inflow becomes just so much simpler for them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to work so hard, especially on the first call that you have with someone. If that's part of your process, you don't have to work so hard to explain what you do or what you're offering them. They've already been prepped for that by your website, and they're probably ready to say yes. And it's really then, the formality of, is this the right fit from your perspective as well?
Yeah. And you talk about the fifth dimension, or fifth dimensionality. And I thought that was pretty neat. Talk about that and what that means, because when you read it, you're like, oh, that's out there. But when you kind of when you understand kind of and read what you're talking about, it makes sense.
Yeah. So I kind of use the term fifth dimensionality as a way to understand how we are extending ourselves into the digital world. And that is just the reality. Like, even as we're interacting, on a video call, like, that's part of fifth dimensionality. It's the consistency and kind of like the met expectations of a person throughout any way that you meet them. So whether you meet me on Instagram or Facebook or on my website or in person, I want you to have a consistent experience of who I am, how I talk, what I share, like how I show up in general. And I think because we are particularly online and, over the last year since the coronavirus happened and the pandemic happened, that consistency is really critical to building trust with people. And trust is that foundation for sales. Like, we want to know we can trust someone when we're going to work with them. When people want to work with me, I want them to know that they can trust me, and that I'm going to do everything that I can do to take care of them and get them what they need. Can I guarantee them clarity if they're not willing to put in the time? Of course not. But
Right.
I am going to do everything in my power to see that they're successful. And there's still, things they need to do as well. But I do want
Yeah.
that trust to be there. And I want that to be conveyed no matter how people meet me online or, what their experience of me is.
Okay. Yeah, that, when I read it, I was like, fifth dimensionality, that's kind of weird. And then I kind of read on your website, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And what are if you had to say, here's the top three things that when customers come to you or people come to you, what are the top three things that usually that they're struggling with from whether it's their website or their digital strategy? What are those keys that you kind of know in the back of your mind that here's what we're probably going to have to do right off the bat? Or is each one completely different?
I mean, it's never this exact same three from person to person, but I would say there's three very common ones. One is recalibration. Like, they have evolved so much and they haven't actually been evolving their website along with them. So their website may be talking to an old sort of ideal client or just doesn't even look like them anymore. I have one client I'm working with right now, and she grew out her bangs during the pandemic. And she's like, I'm not going back to bangs. And I don't want people to see me in bangs everywhere because it's not like how I look anymore.
Yeah.
I got on a call with a potential client, and she had had long blonde hair and actually cut it pixie short and dyed it pink, so it was unexpected for me when I was getting on the call with her. Not that I, didn't think she looked great, but
Yeah.
I had been looking at her website, and her website had almost a kind of a different persona and vibe to it. So
Wow.
that's usually one of the key things, is that there needs to be some sort of recalibration. Almost always with that, offerings have changed. How they want to work with people, how they serve people has evolved as well. So it's a lot of these evolution points that we just have to start to meet them. And sometimes, the other kind of very, very common one is that the way their site has been set up doesn't actually function for their business anymore. They have new needs. They need it to be more automated, more refined. They want people to engage differently. They don't want to have to manually do these pieces of a process in order to, have everything work the way it should. They want something that's just as elegant as their business has become, really. They want that website to meet that. And they want to take advantage of technology in that way.
Yeah.
So those are usually kind of the core things that I'm looking for, and that are very, very common across almost, I would say, most projects that we work on.
Okay. And what about that and I call it a leap because it's probably a big leap, but that jump when you say, you have the owner or the small business, they do everything on their website, kind of like you were doing. They learn to code and they just do it. They go in and they back end it. But at some point, you got to turn it over and say, I got to give Brandi a call. This has got to be, when do you see that people or organizations, when you've got to make that leap to whereas you can't do this, you've got to outsource this piece of it?
I would say when you start falling behind, and this is very, very, very common with a lot of business owners. We kind of wear all of the hats when we're starting out on our business, kind of we're the CEO and the admin assistant, and we are the CFO, and we also, clean the toilets on the weekends, we do it all.
Right.
And this is just kind of one of the critical things I think every business owner needs to do, is be checking in and asking themselves, are the tasks that are taking up my time really pushing my business forward?
Right.
And if you're in there coding and you're in there updating content, I guarantee you, those are not the tasks that push your business forward.
Right.
It's the networking, it's working on the business, not just in the business.
Right.
That it's that distinction. And I think when you start to find yourself at that point of not having enough time, being a little stressed, noticing that there are some things that just fall by the wayside over and over again.
Yeah.
That's really there's a couple of different people who have great tools around this, of being able to just sort through everything you do and start to say, okay, this is what I actually need to delegate. And it's not that you can't do it,
right,
but it's just that you shouldn't do it because it's not truly serving your business's big purpose.
Yeah. And you've got three businesses that you operate, three entities there. You've got Alchemy+Aim, North Star Sites, and then you said interseller support. Is that right?
Interseller support. Yep.
Talk about those three, and what are the differences? What do those three do that are kind of unique to each organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will tell you, this was the decision to create these different companies was very much a marketing and sales decision. And everything was originally under Alchemy+Aim. And what I found challenging was explaining to people all the different things that we did. So we do very custom websites. At the time, we were also within Alchemy+Aim doing like templated sites. So when like someone came in and they were like, hey, I'm just getting started, I need something quick. We had some sort of like quick templates we could put together for them to meet their needs. And I'm a big believer in just making sure that I'm taking care of people, and that my team is taking care of people. And then we also had a support division within Alchemy+Aim as well. So we were, working on going with clients. We were doing these giant, big custom projects. We were doing these much smaller projects. And what I discovered is there was a lot of confusion between what people were expecting. So some of the people who were on the small projects with us were looking at our custom portfolio and saying, wait, why am I not getting that?
Yeah.
And the answer always was, well, because that client has invested 40, 60, however much money, thousands of dollars in the website. And we're trying to get you a 2-page website within a budget of $2,000.
Right. So
I was just finding there was a lot of misplaced expectations because everything was grouped together.
Okay.
So the original break was Alchemy+Aim, like North Star split off from that. And really the focus with North Star Sites is that we build WordPress sites that are customized, but not custom for clients who are just getting started. Or, sometimes it's like a small business who's kind of had a not so good website and needs a better website. They don't need custom yet, but we need to give them a more refined experience and a more intentional experience.
Gotcha.
And I've just found making that little distinction, like they're two different websites.
Yeah.
Like they're two different kind of audiences. I can language to them differently. They have different needs, desires, wants, problems. That has just cleared up so much confusion overall. Like people know what they're getting because they're kind of within a kind of a different company.
Right.
And then last summer, a friend and I decided to start Interstellar Support. She had a business technology business. I had this website business. And what we were finding is that really what happens when someone knows you can do something technical, they think you can do all things technical. Like said, we can build a website, but people were asking us for support with emails, setting up programs on their computer, like getting into CRMs, making those changes. And so she and I had both been experiencing this. And we were like, what if we could create something that provided that support across technology?
Okay.
And we could even better serve people, because now it's not just a matter of like, well, I have some website developers and maybe someone can figure out how to set up email and Outlook and do that thing. We actually have more developers. We've got virtual assistants in there and people who can actually start to really meet the needs of the business owner. Because once they trust you, and that's you build a relationship with them, I want to keep nurturing that relationship with them. And really creating Interstellar Support was my way of nurturing that relationship and better serving them also by being able to expand services there.
So it's like an advanced North Star Sites. You kind of advance.
Yeah, it's just a different like kind of chunk. So we're not like, they don't do templates. They don't do websites there. They only do support. They do support with websites, particularly ones we've built, but sometimes ones we haven't built.
Gotcha.
They do virtual assistants, services, things like that. So, but there's no website building happening within that company.
Okay. No, that's cool. You've really dialed it in. I mean, you've really laser focused those three entities.
Yeah.
What you also talk about the digital experience versus the digital presence. Talk about that a little bit, and why kind of that digital experience is kind of taken over, you know, rather than a digital presence. Because
I think digital presence is very like turn of the century. It's like everyone's like, oh, I have a business, I need a website.
Yeah.
And as long as I have the digital presence, like people will come. That's not the reality. You can't just build a website and hope people magically show up. I wish it worked that way for all of my clients, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so we've always kind of, for a long time, we were thinking in those terms. Oh, I just have something and that's good enough. But the reality these days is that we're interacting with businesses so much digitally, and that goes from website to social media and beyond.
Right.
That again, it's that consistency of experience. Like, you need to start thinking about, how does, the confirmation message on a contact form accurately reflect our company and our brand voice.
Gotcha.
In the same way that we talk to people on Twitter.
Yeah.
In the same way that, when we ship something to someone, it shows up in a professional manner. Or, it shows up with humor, packaged inside in some way or shape or form. It's that ability to kind of like build as much of an experience digitally as you can have of a business or a person physically, like when you're in a space with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really critical, because again, it's what we look for. Like, there's an experience we have of, let's say, an Apple iMac, that when we go to the store, we have a similar experience, that when we call tech support, we have a similar experience.
Yeah.
So that, we understand like who this company is and who we're buying from and the people who serve it in so many ways.
Yeah. No, that's really neat. What does when someone comes to Alchemy and AIM or North Star, any of your organizations, what does that experience? How do you take someone through the process? What does that look like high level when they contact you and they reach out to you?
Yeah. For me, particularly, so I'm more in Alchemy and AIM and North Star, and we have a team who's in Interstellar. I only am CEO there, which is really fantastic.
Yeah.
Or co-CEO in that case. So really, when it comes to to North Star and Alchemy and AIM, one of the first things that I have people do is fill out a contact form. I don't make it too long or complex, because I don't necessarily need all the info from them there.
Yeah.
But I do want to get a little bit of info just to kind of start to get a sense of how I need to direct them or how I need to interact with them. Are we the right people? Like, I have had some people come to me and they're like, I need help with a podcast launch. And I'm like, that's great. I can build you a podcast website, but we don't do launches, like it's just not our thing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
there's an agency I can refer you to in that case.
Right.
So that happened. So I get a little bit of information that way. I then follow up personally with an email to like let them know what the next steps are, whether it's, hey, sorry, that's not something we do, but I can refer you to these people, or let's take the next step in. I want to schedule a call and I want to get a little bit more information about your project. And I actually send them a link to a little bit of a longer questionnaire, which is a little different depending upon where I think they are in their business.
Yeah.
And that just allows me to gather some of that additional information, so that then when they get on the call with me, I don't have to spend time asking for like info and data. I can spend time really, really asking them questions and getting to know what they really need.
Yeah.
Not like, do you have a website already? What's the URL? Let me look at it. Do you have other websites you like? I mean, I can get that in the questionnaire. I want to have a very human to human experience.
Yeah. Excellent.
When I'm interacting with someone on an actual sales call, or actually, I even like to think of it as just a service call. I'm like, I'm just going to help them.
Yeah.
And very often that sometimes means they're going to work with me.
Yeah.
But I just want to start by figuring out what do they need and how can we really support that.
Yeah, that's a discovery session you're having with them.
Exactly. So that's kind of like, that's our basic, experience on flow. But I make sure that, after they fill out the contact form, like the language is written by me. I want them to know we're professional, but friendly, Sometimes when they finish longer forms, sometimes I'll throw in questions. I'll phrase questions in very certain ways.
Yeah.
One of the questions I put in my longer questionnaire is, if you and I are having coffee in a year and you're raving about all of the great things that have happened to you, what are you telling me about?
Yeah.
It's just, it's the phrasing as much as it is what the information is. And that's all of those like little components. They're just tiny touch points, but that's what makes the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's the best place for the listeners to get in contact with you, to get in contact with your organization, whichever one it may be? How do they reach out, and how do they get in touch with you so that they can start getting in touch with you and working through this branding and this digital strategy?
Yeah. Easiest thing to do, I tell people, is go to the alchemy&aim.com website, hit the contact button, fill out that form. That comes to me and my team, and we respond to everything that we see come in.
Okay. So all you listeners, get to that website, get that form filled out, and get in touch with her. Brandi works with a lot of just really high level people that you would know, but she probably also works with a lot of people that's just getting started and middle of the road. So take advantage of this wisdom and knowledge that she has. One last question for you. I ask every guest this on the Sales Vitamin podcast. If you had one sales vitamin to give today to your sales team or another sales professional or somebody that was in your shoes 8 to 10 years ago, what's that one sales vitamin you want to give them?
The biggest thing is see it as service, not sales. That honestly, I'm an introvert, and that has made the biggest difference for how I interact with people, is that I'm never trying to sell people. I'm always serving them, and the sale happens in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. You're providing value and
Yes.
providing the service. So that's awesome. That's a great sales vitamin. Well, Brandi, it's been great having you on today. I know you could talk about this stuff for 24 hours straight. It's all fascinating. It's interesting. And I think it's so impactful from a sales standpoint, the whole digital experience and where it's at. So I'm grateful you spent some time today and coming on the show. And I know the listeners are really going to get a lot of value from this.
And thank you so much for having me today, John. This has been a lot of fun.
You bet.